I've worked behind a bar for 15 years. I've seen every type come and go. Drifters, hunters, factorymen. A few who didn't belong anywhere but there. After a while, the stories all start sounding the same. Bad marriages, bad luck, even bad whiskey. So you learn to tune it out. Nod in the right places, keep the drinks coming. But every now and then, somebody sits down and says something that don't sound like a story. It sounds like a confession. Now here's what you need to know about me. I won't give you my name, or where this happened. But I promise you, friend, everything that I tell you is true. I know it might come off like some bad movie, but I have no reason to reach out to you other than to tell you this story. No reason to fabricate this or waste my time. But here's what I have to tell you. That man, the one that confessed something crazy to me, his name was Ray. He was in his mid-50s, quiet sort. Been coming in about 4 years. Always sat at the far end near the jukebox, back against the wall. He never talked much, never smiled, never interacted with anybody else. Never even got up when there was a fight. Folks joked he was just part of the furniture. I can't say I even knew much about him. He didn't seem like anyone did. But that night, something was different. He was staring into his glass like there was something alive in it. His hand was trembling just enough that the ice clinked softly. I leaned over, drying the glass, and said, "You look like a man got ghosts rattling around in his head." He gave a low laugh that kind of died before it even started. He didn't look up at me, he just stared at the glass and said, "You ever keep quiet about something so long it starts to rot you from the inside?" I just nodded and gave a low laugh. I poured another drink and told him it was on me, because he clearly had something on his mind. He watched the liquid swirl, and then he said quietly, "It's the day that my brother died." And that's when he started to talk. Ray took a long drink before he spoke again, like he was trying to wash the memory down before it climbed back up his throat. But he said, "Me and Matt, we grew up on Boone Place, the old farmhouse our granddad built by hand back in the 40s. It was a couple of acres of pasture, a barn, a stand of woods that backs right up against the government land. I moved into town after Ma passed. Couldn't stand the quiet. But Matt, he stayed. Said somebody had to keep the place standing." He looked at me then, eyes half glazed from the whiskey and memory. This is what he told me. I hope I do tell his tale justice, because it's one that I'll never forget myself. What I learned was Matt wasn't the type to scare easy. He was steady as they come, up before the sun, in bed before the late news. Didn't talk much, didn't drink much. Just a good man that worked hard and minded his own business. That's what made what happened so damn strange. You see, he called Ray one night, early fall, said something been hanging around his property. He thought it was a coyote at first, but then he saw the prints. Too big for a coyote, too strange for anything else. Ray said Matt had found them behind the barn, 5-toed, long, with deep claw grooves. He said they looked human, kind of, only wrong. Maybe a human mixed with a wolf. The spacing was off, like whoever or whatever made him didn't walk right. Ray told him that maybe a really big dog had been passing through, a stray, or maybe even a small bear. Matt didn't argue, but Ray could hear the unease in his voice. He wasn't convinced, and that's not like him, Ray said. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to get worse. Matt started seeing something in his yard, always near the treeline, always at dusk. Something on all fours, but sometimes it would stand up. He said it moved like it was testing him. It didn't charge, didn't run, just watched him. Then came the scratching. Long drags against the wood porch, like nails testing for weak spots. Matt found gouges in the siding numerous times, deep and uneven. Even the dogs refused to go out at night. He said the goats stopped coming up for feed. They'd just stare at the woods, ears flat like they were waiting for something. As Ray talked, his voice kept getting lower. It was steady, but frayed at the edges. He said one night, Matt called him, whispering, "It's out there now, looking in." Ray said he could hear it through the phone, the fear that his brother had. This faint rasp, like slow, scared breathing, only heavier. It didn't sound like his brother at all, because he didn't scare, but he could hear it right there in his breath. And then all of a sudden, Matt hung up. He wanted to stress that Matt never got spooked. He chased off all kinds of people with shotguns, stood between a bull and a broken fence without blinking, even went up against a bear himself one time, trying to protect the goats. But that night, Ray heard fear in his voice, and it was real fear. The kind of man only gets when he's looking at something that shouldn't exist. Now I remember thinking to myself at this point that this dude is either drunk or really good at spinning tales, but the more I watched him, the more I didn't think that I was right. Like I said, I've been slinging drinks my whole life, and I could read a guy pretty good. Ray stared at the bar the entire time he talked, thumb tracing the grain in the wood like he could carve the story into it. He wasn't pulling my leg at all. I was sure of that. He said the next morning after that call, he drove out there. He couldn't shake the sound of his brother's voice, and he found him sitting in the kitchen with a shotgun across his knees. Looked like he hadn't shaved in days, hadn't slept in even longer than that. His eyes were bloodshot. They were wild around the edges. He seemed to jump at every sound. The floor creaking, the wind rattling the windows, even Ray's voice. And when Ray asked what he'd seen, Matt just nodded. He let him out back. "You see him?" he said, pointing toward the mud near the shed. What Ray saw that day confused him. Fresh prints deep in the ground. He said the prints were clear as day, sunk an inch into the ground, big as a man's hand, but shaped wrong. Long toes, claws like little knives, and heavy, like whatever made them was damn near 300 pounds. They led right up to the shed. When I opened the door, he said, the smell hit me like a brick wall, like a dead animal left in the sun. It was obvious that something had been living in there. The tools were pushed aside, hay was matted down, and the walls had scratch marks higher than his head. He said Matt had seen it clear the night before. He told him it stood taller than the doorframe, built like a man but thick through the shoulders. Its arms hung low, hands big enough to wrap around a bucket handle, ears pointed, muzzle short, eyes yellow like a lantern behind fog. It was like a man and a wolf combined. Matt thought it was some kind of throwback, like something that crawled out of the woods before our time. Said maybe it was drawn to the house because the land used to be woods, like it was claiming it back. He figured it was territorial, not evil exactly, just mean in its nature. Ray said he begged him to come to town for a while, to stay with him, but Matt shook his head. If I don't deal with it now, it'll never leave. But after that, the weirdness escalated. The animals refused to go near the back fence. Matt's motion lights clicked on and off all night, but nothing showed on the ground when he checked. At night, he said he could hear it pacing, 2 steps, 3, then a pause, and then a couple more, like it was counting or keeping watch over the house itself, maybe even hunting him. Then one morning, Matt told Ray that he was going to drive it off. He said he'd wait in an old deer blind near the ridge with his rifle and a spotlight. It was at this point Ray actually slammed the glass down and looked me right in the eyes. He said, "I told him he was out of his damn mind. We fought, the first time in years, and I left angry." And then Ray kind of went quiet for a moment. When he talked again, his voice was just breaking into a whisper. He said that was the last time he saw his brother alive. I felt like it was time for another drink. I poured us both a glass. I knew I had a job to do, but I wasn't moving away from Ray. I was too damn interested in what he had to say. His voice was hoarse now as he was talking, like he was trying to fight back tears, like each word was being dragged out of him. He said he didn't hear from Matt for 2 days after that argument. At first, he figured he was sulking. Both of them had bad tempers. They usually needed a little space before they cooled off, but something was pulling at his gut. By the second night, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He drove out there to check on his brother. Matt's truck was in the driveway, mud caked to the tires, driver's door unlocked. The house was dark. He called out for him but didn't get an answer. He went inside and right away knew something was off, because his rifle was gone, his coat too. There was a cup of coffee, half drank, on the counter. On the kitchen table, Ray found an envelope with his name scrawled across it in Matt's handwriting. The paper inside, he said, was smudged with dirt, and there were a few spots that looked like either dried rain or tears. Now here's the kicker. This guy sitting across from me, maybe he was just bluffing. Maybe he was trying to pull my leg, maybe it's a prank. But if that's the case, then why did he pull out an old envelope from his jacket pocket? No man carries something like that around just to spin a story. And that envelope, it looked old. Like he'd opened it, read what was inside 1,000 times, and folded it back up. He took it out and showed it to me. I can't remember the exact words that were written on it, but it was something along the lines of, Ray, if you're reading this, things went south. I'm gonna find it, run it off once and for all. Don't come looking for me. This ain't your fight. I'm doing what has to be done. If I don't come back, don't let folks forget that I wasn't crazy. This thing doesn't belong here on Earth. It's some kind of monster. Your brother, Matt. Ray said he ran out to the shed first. The door was open. It smelled the same as before. Rot, wet fur, that same damn stink. But there was no sign of Matt. Just his flashlight lying in the dirt, dead battery and all. He searched the property till dark. The fields, the ridge, the tree line. Couldn't find anything that could point in the direction of where his brother was. He called the sheriff that night, told him his brother was missing, and they organized a search party the next morning. There were locals, deputies, a couple of old friends. They combed through those woods for 2 days. They found pieces of his jacket first, ripped clean through like they'd been caught in machinery. On the third day, one of the dogs started barking near a ravine. They found drag marks in the leaves, blood and streaks, and what was left of Matt. It wasn't all of him, Ray said quietly. Just enough to know that it was him. Ray didn't describe that in detail. He didn't have to, because his eyes did all the talking. The sheriff ended up ruling it a predator attack, said it was probably a bear or a cat, told Ray it was a miracle they found anything at all. But Ray shook his head slowly. Ain't no bear did that. Whatever got him, it wasn't hunting for food. It was cleaning up its territory. And my brother got in its way. He looked down at his glass, voice gone soft. I ain't picked up a rifle since. Truth is, I ain't gone back out there at all. I just keep drinking, hoping someday I'll forget about it. And then Ray sat there, quiet for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the neon light and the rain ticking against the window. Everybody else had already gone. He stared at the last of his whiskey like he was looking through it into someplace else. Hell, maybe he was looking into those woods. It's been eating at me, he said finally. I ain't told nobody the whole story till tonight. Today makes 4 years. I figured I'd owe Matt that much, to let someone know the truth before it takes me too. He raised his eyes, and for a second they caught the light just enough for me to see how damn tired they were. I don't want pity, he said. I just want somebody to know that he wasn't crazy. He thought it was a beast out there, but I think it's something worse. Something that watches just to see if you believe in it. Then he finished his drink, slid a few bills across the counter, which was more than enough to pay for it. He said, keep the change. Then he got up and headed for the door. The rain swallowed him up. I stood there watching his taillights fade down that old road, hoping that he was wrong, but deep down I knew he probably wasn't. Like I said, the bar was completely empty now. Last call had come and gone, but hell if I was going to interrupt a man spilling that kind of truth that's been eating him alive for so long. I started wiping glasses out of habit, I think just to keep my hands busy, but they weren't steady. I was shaking. I kept hearing Ray's voice in my head, that quiet, breaking tone when he said it watches to see if you believe in it. And when I finally stepped out back to dump the trash, the night felt different to me. Like it was dangerous. I doubt that anything was out there with me, I just had all of that on my mind. That was the first night that I looked at the dark different. Ray never came back after that. Maybe he passed. Maybe he finally slept. Maybe he moved on. Who the hell knows? But I think that story, that guilt, it hollowed him out until he had to let go of it. Wherever you are, Ray, I believe you. I don't know if you read these, but I need to tell you what happened. My name is Lucas. I'm a logger from southern Poland, near the Czech border. I've listened to your channel for a while now, and I've heard people talk about things they've seen in the woods. Things they can't explain. Things that shouldn't exist. Things that can harm us. I used to think it was all imagination. The kind of stories men tell after too many drinks. But something happened 5 years ago that I still can't make peace with. I've spent most of my life in the forest. You should know that. I know wolves, I know bears, I know the sounds the woods make when they're alive, and when they aren't. What I saw out there wasn't any of those. I wish it had been. Officially, my friend and coworker Merrick was killed by wolves. That's what the authorities said. That's what they told his wife. But I know better. Wolves don't watch you like that. They don't follow you for hours without attacking. And they sure as hell don't walk on two legs. I'm not writing this to scare anyone or to get attention. The names I'm giving aren't even real. But this did in fact happen in Poland. If you decide to read this on your show, I don't want fame. I just want someone to know that what happened wasn't wolves. It was one of those things out there. It was late autumn when it happened. The kind of season where daylight never really takes hold, just smolders gray until it slips back into the night. I was working with my usual crew then, but by the time everybody left, it was Merrick, my closest friend since trade school, and our foreman Carol. He'd been in the forest industry since before I was even born. We'd been contracted to clear a section of border forest not far from the Czech line, a stretch of deep pine that locals said hadn't been touched since the war. We'd been at it nearly 2 weeks when the truck gave out that night. It was an old diesel with more rust than paint. She sputtered and died halfway down a logging road that wasn't even on our maps. We were a good 20 kilometers from the nearest village, and almost twice that from the main camp. Carol tried the ignition a few times before swearing and kicking the tire. No signal on any of our phones either. "We'll hike out in the morning," he said. "Better to stay put than break a leg in the dark." None of us argued. We built a small fire near the side of the truck and cooked what was left of our food from lunch. The fog rolled in, and the light was gone. The fog was thick and low, like smoke settling between the trees. We weren't greenhorns. We'd worked every kind of terrain Poland has to offer. Wet bogs, high timber, wolf country. We'd chased off a drunk poacher or two. We knew the forest and its moods, but that night something was off. Usually, after dark, the woods still make noise. You hear the wind in the pines, the crack of the branches, the shuffle of things that are alive. But as the last bit of daylight slipped away, everything stopped. No creaks, no owls, not even the whisper of needles moving overhead. It was like every animal in the forest was hiding from something. Merrick tossed another branch on the fire and muttered that it felt like a graveyard. But neither of us answered. We just sat there listening to the silence grow thicker until it felt like the woods itself was dark enough to watch us. And then it started just after midnight. The thing that haunts me to this very day. The thing that I still can't quite explain. You see, we'd let the fire die down to coals. We were wrapped in our jackets, half asleep in the cab of the truck. And that's when I heard it first. Movement. Not branches snapping in the wind. Not some fox nosing through scraps. Whatever was out there was heavy. It was moving slowly and pacing. Merrick sat up first, hand going to the hatchet that he kept under the seat. Wolves. It has to be. Carol just grunted, listening. The sound came again. Soft crunches in the leaf litter, and then stillness. It moved in a line, stopped, and then moved again, like it was testing how close it could get to us. "That's one wolf, not a pack," Carol said under his breath. Merrick stepped out before either of us could stop him. He was muttering curses. He picked up a rock and hurled it into the dark, trying to scare off whatever was out there. We heard it land, and then the woods answered back with a single deep grunt. It made my skin prickle, for whatever was out there sounded very big. I grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the trees. All we saw were two eyes reflecting back like embers in a furnace. Too far apart, too high off the ground. A man would have had to stand on a stump to reach that height. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back at us. "Wolves don't stand like that," Merrick whispered. And then it blinked, and the sound started. A low growl, deep and wet, vibrating through the air. You could feel it in your chest, even though we were further away from it. It wasn't the sharp bark of a wolf or the rumble of a bear. It sounded thick, like something breathing through blood. The smell hit next. Rotten meat and sweat, like a dead animal mixed with bad body odor and iron. It rolled through the fog and stuck in our throats. "Get in the truck," Carol ordered. I'd seen fear on him before, but not like this. This was a fear that I couldn't explain. This was a primal fear, and the urging in his voice made us move quickly. We slammed the doors, locked them. The flashlight beam wavered over the tree line again, but the eyes were gone. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just silence so heavy it pressed against the glass, but then came the most blood-curdling howl that I have ever heard in my life. It started low, like a wolf call, but halfway through, it changed. The pitch twisted upwards into something almost human, higher, desperate, like a man screaming through torn lungs. It echoed through the trees, bounced off the ridge, and died in a way that it didn't sound like it had ever really ended. Merrick whispered a prayer under his breath. Carol's jaw was clenched tight enough to creak. And then, as if to remind us it was still out there, something brushed against the truck. This creature, whatever it was, had strength. The whole frame shuddered. A deep thud against the side paneling made all of us jump. Then we heard another step, this time toward the front, and another bump. Whatever was out there was quick, could move in the darkness without being seen, and was strong enough to shake the truck with 3 grown men inside. Then everything went silent again. We didn't sleep after that. We only discussed what it could be, and we waited for the light. Around 3 a.m, the truck started to shake violently. This wasn't from the wind. It wasn't from a slide in the mud. Something was pushing it. The metal groaned. Glass rattled in the frames. Merrick jolted awake and shouted, fumbling for the hatchet. Carol already had the big felling axe in his hands. "Stay inside," I yelled, but he'd already swung open the door. Cold air and fog poured in. Merrick jumped down, boots hitting dirt, bellowing like a madman into the dark. The beam of my flashlight cut through the fog, and that's when I saw it. I gazed for only a moment or two at this thing, but what I saw has been the cause of many nightmares, and is something I will never be able to forget. I will see it clearly until my time has come. It was standing maybe 20 meters away, half hidden between the pines, tall, broad, standing upright on 2 legs. The head was wrong. It was too long and narrow to be anything that stood on 2 legs. This looked like a wolf stretched over a man's skull. Its shoulders were massive, the chest wide, and when it moved, it rolled forward like it had to remember how to stand that way. But this was no ordinary wolf. This was a creature that only lives in nightmares. Except there it was, right in front of us. The light hit it full on, and it recoiled. Not afraid, not angry. It lifted an arm, a huge pawed hand curling over its face to block the glare. The fingers were long, ending in black claws that caught the beam like glass. Its lips peeled back in a soundless snarl, teeth slick with saliva. Carol swung the axe through empty air and shouted again. The creature stepped back into the trees. We heard it crash through the underbrush with impossible speed, circling instead of running off. I snapped the flashlight toward the noise, heart hammering. "Get in! Get in the damn truck!" I shouted. Carol and Merrick both slammed the doors behind them. But then the truck rocked harder again. Whatever had been there was back immediately, and it wasn't afraid of getting close to the truck. Claws streaked down the side panel. We were screaming, swearing, trying to start the engine, but it was still no use. "We can't stay here," Merrick said. "It'll come back. I'll go for a cabin I know. 2 kilometers. I'll call for help." "You're not going anywhere," I told him. But he was already grabbing the flashlight from my hand. 2 kilometers, he said. "I could make it. Keep the doors locked." Carol grabbed his sleeve. "You don't know what's out there." "I know it's not going to stay out there forever. Soon it will attack the truck, and if nobody goes for help, all of us will die." He stepped out, slammed the door, and vanished into the fog before I could grab him and stop him. The beam of the flashlight bobbed along the logging trail, steady at first, then slower and smaller. We watched it through the windshield, both of us holding our breath. 5 minutes, maybe less. Then the beam stopped moving. Then it dropped. What I could only describe as a terrified scream tore through the trees. It was short and strangled and ending too fast, and then there was nothing. I stared at the spot where the light had fallen until the batteries bled out. The forest took it. Neither of us spoke in that truck. Neither of us moved. We sat there till dawn, locked in that truck, afraid to even breathe, waiting for the sun to prove we were still alive. The windows inside were thick with the fog that we had created from breathing so heavily, but neither of us dared wipe the fog away, because we were afraid that that thing would be looking back in. When light finally came, it didn't feel like morning. The fog was still thick enough to choke on. The sun was just turning it gray. Carol and I hadn't slept a moment. We sat there in silence, gripping the tools like they'd save us from what was out there. "We have to find him," Carol said. His voice sounded used up, though. I didn't want to open that door, but leaving Merrick out there felt worse. After all, this was my dear friend, and I had feared what had happened to him all night. We stepped out together, slowly, scanning the tree line. The forest was still dead quiet. It felt like the wind wasn't even moving. About 30 meters down the trail, I spotted the flashlight lying half buried in the leaves, lens cracked. I picked it up, thumbed the switch, but it was dead. And then I saw the blood. Not a lot at first, just drops, then smears, and then a streak. We followed it until it led to a patch of churned dirt, drag marks like someone had been pulled backwards through the leaves. And then nothing. The trail ended like he'd been lifted straight into the air. No tracks, no prints, just silence and that same thick, rotten smell that had haunted us all night. Carol crossed himself and said, "We're going back." I didn't argue. We made it to the main road by mid-afternoon and flagged on a farmer hauling wood. He drove us to the nearest village, where we told the police what had happened. They sent a team that evening, but neither of us went back with them. I was done with that forest. 3 days later, they found what was left of my friend. The sheriff wouldn't let us see, but I overheard enough to know. His body was mauled, torn open, some bones were crushed in. He was half buried near the edge of a ravine. They said it was a wolf attack, probably a big pack that had dragged him off. I didn't go to his funeral. I couldn't. I just kept thinking about that creature, that werewolf, how angry and hungry it had looked. I never told anyone outside of Carol what really happened that night. The company sent investigators, the police asked their questions, and we both gave the same story, the one that they wanted to hear. Wolves, nothing more. After the report was filed and Merrick was buried, no one brought it up again. Carol and I talked once after that. He came by my place a few weeks later. He looked like he had aged 10 years in those weeks. We sat in silence for most of it, pouring a drink in the name of our friend. When he finally spoke, all he said was, "You didn't imagine it, Lucas. I saw it too." Then he finished his drink and left. I heard he quit logging the next spring and moved south. The last I heard, he was somewhere near Brno. I never saw him again. As for me, I never went back to that forest either. I simply couldn't do it. I switched to construction. I worked in the city. But still, I dream about it. Sometimes I'm back in that truck, the glass fog from our breath, watching, waiting for that monster to break through the glass and grab us. I know how this sounds. You don't have to believe me. But if you do, don't go into those woods alone. Wolves do not walk upright, and they don't stare you down like a man deciding what to do with you. I lost a friend that night. I lost my sanity for a while after that too. I lost part of me that I will never get back, and it all happened in that forest. Regards, Lucas. Before we get into the third story, I just wanted to take a moment to note that I got this story from a friend of mine's YouTube channel that I heard a long time ago. He's no longer with us, but this story always had a place in the back of my mind. And when I got the other two accounts where Dogman had actually killed people, I wanted to add this one, no questions asked. So, this one's for you, Brenton. I hope you're resting easy. I went to visit my uncle in Lee County, Kentucky. It's a small town, deep holler country, the kind of place where stories hang heavier than the fog. That night, we were on his back porch, sipping coffee and talking when his phone rang. It was a friend of his, one of those old-school woodsmen who barely ever came to town. He grew his own food, hunted year-round, fixed his own gear. He lived out there so deep you'd lose signal halfway down his driveway. My uncle answered his call, and I heard the man's voice say, "I really need to come talk to you, man. When can I come over?" My uncle told him, "I'm just sitting here with my nephew. Come on out if you want." While we waited, my uncle filled me in. He said he'd known that man his whole life. They'd grown up together, hunted together, seen more woods than most people ever would. He said, "That man's the best shot I've ever known. Goes deer hunting and comes back with 1 bullet missing per deer. He never wastes a shot." A while later, the man pulled up. The moment I saw him step out of his truck, I knew something was off. He looked rattled and pale, restless, eyes darting like he was still listening for something behind him. He sat down on the porch and ran a hand through his hair and said, "I really don't know how else to say this, so I'm just going to tell you straight. Something happened to me tonight." He told us he'd been sitting on his porch earlier that evening, rifle beside him, cup of coffee in his hand. Out there, that's just part of life. You keep a gun close in case a bear wanders up. He said he started hearing howling in the distance, but it was coming closer. At first, he thought it was a Bigfoot. He'd seen something like that around his property before and figured it was just another sighting, loud but harmless. But then this thing stepped out of the tree line. About 100 feet from his porch was this big, tall, completely wrong-looking thing. He said he could only make out its outline at first. Broad shoulders, long arms, but it wasn't shaped like any animal that he knew. And remember, this man lived in the woods. He probably knew every animal out there better than most people in the entire state. He went inside for a refill, came back out, and this thing had moved closer. And that's when he saw it clearly. The head of a German shepherd, pointed ears and all, sitting on the body of a man. He told us, "Take a German shepherd's head, stick it on a tall man's frame," and that's exactly what it looked like. Now I had heard of Dogman before, so I mentioned it to him. He said he'd never heard that name, but admitted, "That's about as good a name as any." He said the thing started walking towards him, slow and deliberate. He stood up, rifle in hand, and shouted, "If you take one more step, I'll shoot, and I won't miss," hoping that maybe this was some guy in a costume. But this thing didn't stop. He warned again, but it still kept coming. So, he fired. He said the shot hit it square in the chest. He saw the impact through the scope, saw the spray of blood. But this creature only staggered. It didn't drop, and then it bolted back into the woods, and that was it. He sat there, shaking, heart hammering, staring at the tree line. Said he couldn't just stop thinking about what he'd seen, and what it meant. He told us, "What if I didn't kill it? What if it comes back? What if it's not alone?" My uncle told him he didn't have to go home. Said he could stay the night, but the man refused and said, "If it's waiting for me. I'm not bringing it to you." And with that, his friend left. But then around 2 in the morning, my uncle's phone rang again. It was his friend. My uncle answered, "What's wrong?" And the voice on the other end was pure panic. He was yelling, "It's trying to get in. It's gonna kill me." Then a sound came, like the front door being hit with a sledgehammer. Wood splintering. He heard the man scream, "Get away!" and then a gunshot. And then there was a growl. Deep, guttural. Like something dragging a snarl through its lungs. And then there was silence. My uncle called the sheriff immediately. They were close friends too. We drove straight out there, but by the time we arrived, the sheriff was already on the scene. He stopped us at the gate of this man's house and said, "You need to go home. Don't call anyone. Don't say anything." My uncle said, "I didn't drive all the way out here just to be sent home. What's going on?" The sheriff looked uneasy to me, and he said, "I can't tell you. There are people here who told me to lock the scene down." That's when 2 men in suits walked out of the house. My uncle leaned toward me and whispered, "FBI." The sheriff just nodded. "Yeah, you can't be here," he said. We weren't far from the porch, and my uncle suddenly glanced down and nudged me. He motioned me with his eyes. I looked, and there it was. This huge, canine paw print. It was pressed deep into the mud, about the size of my hand. My uncle asked, "Is he okay?" The sheriff sighed. "I'll tell you this much, then you need to go home. Part of him is in there." We just stood there. He looked down again and said, "All we found was his foot and a lot of blood." Minutes later, a news van even pulled up, but the men in the suits waved them off before they could even step out. Told them to leave, and they did. Later that night, the sheriff called my uncle. His voice was low and uneasy. He said, "I gave you my word I'd tell you what happened, but I can't. We've been sworn to silence. I think we're being watched." My uncle asked how the FBI got there so fast, and his sheriff friend said, "They told me years ago if something strange ever happened again to call them, but I didn't even dial their number yet. I just had my phone out, and they showed up, like they were already tracking it." My uncle asked what "it" was, and the sheriff paused. He said they're calling it a black bear attack, but I've seen bears, and that was no bear.